You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome into another 3-Mall pod. First, let's start with the bad news. It's just me hosting today, but the good news is I'm joined by someone I consider to be the best college football analyst in the sport, and Brock Huard, who, along with Jason Benetti, called the K-State-Oklahoma State game on Fox on Saturday and will once again be on the call this Saturday as the Wildcats take on Texas at 6 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. Brock, first and foremost, I know you've got your own radio show in Seattle. I know you're traveling, getting ready for games each week and have a crazy schedule. So I just want to start off by thanking you for graciously jumping on and spending some time with us.
Well, you got it. We were chatting just before we started about how K-State's one of the jewels for me and for our crew to get to. It's not the easiest place in college football, and I know you all hear that and probably get tired of hearing that. But I tell people all the time, and I said it to you just a few moments ago, like once you get there, it's well worth it. And the games have been phenomenal, and I think the K-State folks hope the third time continues to be the charm. It was Oklahoma first, it was Oklahoma State second, and now, and we'll see. It may be on Fox. I don't know if you know that or not. It's all dependent on the World Series. So if the World Series ends, then it will be on Big Fox Saturday night, which will be just a blast too.
Well, I know K-State fans probably think you and Jason and Allison on the sideline are good luck charms. You've actually coincidentally called both K-State's wins against top 10 teams, and both times coming off losses. So let's just start things off. What were some of your biggest takeaways from K-State's dominant win over Oklahoma State? How did they just completely dismantle the Cowboys in the way that they did?
Yeah, well, we were just looking at the numbers. I don't know if you saw the ratings for the game.
I did.
We get those every week. I mean, it will be the highest rated 48-0 game in my life. I don't think honestly, I mean, and I felt that way coming out of it. I never felt like the game lost steam or intrigue because this was just, it was so unexpected. It was inexplicable. Mike Gundy's teams never get shut out. They're never non-competitive. It never looks like that. And the fact that K-State did it with their backup quarterback down, their middle linebacker down some players, and they just rallied and played, as Kleiman said in the locker room and post-game, like, that's it. That's the best game in 4 years, and there's the standard. And, yeah, it was rather inexplicable. I don't think any of us saw a 48-0. Anybody in that building that day that walked in thought, okay, well, these are two similar teams. I've got friends on both staff, Jason McAdoo at Oklahoma State I played with the Seahawks, great guy, and I love picking his brain when I do Cowboys games, and he had the same thought I did. He's like, yep, two teams built very similar, recruit similar kids, train them, equip them, and develop them in similar ways, and probably be special teams or a big play here or there. And to see 48-0 was quite a statement.
Yeah, for sure. And I did see the ratings, Brock. That's incredible. That's probably a credit to you and Jason as well. Like I said, I mean, you guys are such a great broadcast. I'll just tell you, Brock, my wife was stuck at home watching our twin girls, so she wasn't able to go to the game. And she was texting me during the game for the first time ever about the announcers and how much she enjoyed the broadcast. So I just have to tell you that as a shout out. You guys are terrific.
Well, we do enjoy, and that hopefully comes across. And I think you do see, sadly, crews at the highest of levels that you can just tell when they don't enjoy one another and they don't enjoy their team. It's no different than any team sport. When I'm on an airplane and I'm studying, and inevitably somebody looks at my board, right, that I've got in front of me, and they're like, what are you? Are you a crazy coach, a crazy gambler? What are you? And, no, I'm a broadcaster, and it leads to the inevitable. We're like Ocean's 11, right? That's my analogy. We come in, we do a job. There's a crew of about 35 of us, cameramen and women, graphics, producers, truckers, the whole operation that it takes. And we go from one spot to another. And this week that semi got to stay right there in Manhattan. So a little bit of a breather for those guys. But when you have a crew that enjoys working and every oar is in the water together, and Jason is so fun and so witty, about as witty and fun a guy that I've ever worked with. You mentioned Tessitore and Joe Davis, so many talented people. But Jason keeps me on my toes. He is hilarious, and it's been a real treat this season.
Yeah. Well, you were at OU for what I would say was one of Adrian Martinez's best games of his career, and really his coming out party as a Wildcat in the win against the Sooners. And you were also on the call for Will Howard's best game of his career Saturday against OSU. If you're Chris Kleiman and Colin Klein, what do you do going forward at quarterback? Do you go back to Martinez when he's fully healthy? Do you stick with Howard given what we've seen from him and the offense the last 2 games? What are your thoughts there?
Well, that is a loaded question, right? In a lot of different ways. I know Chris had his presser today or yesterday. I'm sure he was asked about it. Do you have the latest and greatest? What was his sentiment?
Still undecided. He was asked several questions about it, said Adrian was getting closer to 100%, but was still up in the air if, they would move forward with Will or Adrian. So it's, it seems like they're something that they're debating as well.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, that had we not had Allison on the sidelines doing her job, and she does it phenomenally well, watching warmups, I would have gone up to that booth and said, Adrian starting. I mean, he did. He was with the number 1 center. He was taking number 1 reps. He didn't have a knee brace on. He was moving fluidly. He was throwing well. I would have thought for sure on Saturday that was going to be Adrian's job. When I chatted with Colin, even on the field, terrific guy, become a friend as well. We have family friends and everything else. And he said, you know what? I really genuinely feel so good. I slept so good knowing that we'll be fine either way. And these guys are friends and they care about one another, which is also so unique. So that dynamic of those guys and their genuine true bond. And then on top of it, Will had a good week, all the reps. He was ready to go. Adrian had great warm up, and it was Adrian. It was Adrian's decision. They I think point blank asked him walking into the locker room up that tunnel, what do you think? And they needed 100%, not 90. Are you 90? Are you 80? Are you 90? Are you good? Nope. We need 100% or not. And he could not say, I'm 100%, because you don't know with a hit. You don't know with game speed. You don't know once the live bullets are flying. So I understand maybe his hesitation too, without a bevy of work and practice, but that will be the tell-all. Who gets the number 1s this week, right? Who gets the majority of the preparation will likely be the one starting Saturday. And if you're Chris Kleiman and Colin Klein, you tell no one. And you make sure that Sarkisian and Pete Kwiatkowski have got a plan for a little more of a running threat with Adrian, a little more of a pocket guy with Will, a little bit more variation in the passing game with Will, a little bit more QB run, obviously, with Adrian. And that's a card they're going to keep in their back pocket, I am sure, until kickoff Saturday.
Well, to that point, I mean, what differences have you noticed schematically from K-State when it's Adrian on the field versus Howard? And in your opinion, which quarterback is maybe more conducive for this offense when looking at the skill talent, how it's built, and what Colin Klein wants to do?
Well, tell me how the O-line is going to block and play, because I think that is probably the overriding, right, for either of them, for any quarterback. And those guys Saturday were absolute monsters, and they're going to have to be this Saturday. I'll just tell you right off the bat, I've had a day of film study, but Texas is the fastest, most talented team I've seen on tape. That's just tape. And obviously they've lost 3 games, all by 1 possession, right? They gave it away in Stillwater. They were a corner blitz away from beating Alabama, and then the same thing at Tech in a back and forth, and just couldn't stop them. I mean, it's easy to make the case that they should easily, be with a 1-loss team and even undefeated team in the playoff discussion right now. They have that kind of just twitch and explosion and speed, and it will be a different animal than the wounded animal that K-State devoured last Saturday. So I didn't answer your last question very well, so I'll try to give you all that soliloquy and come back to your question of skill sets are different. Adrian is a artist. Will is a blacksmith. That's they're different in skill sets. Adrian will have a 3rd and 16 at Oklahoma and run, and all of a sudden that should never happen. You should never paint that picture. You shouldn't be able to break 5 tackles and get the most critical 3rd down conversion in the 4th quarter in that game that Sooner fans were talking about on the rental car bus the next day. Will is going to have to throw it, and he processes a little quicker than Adrian, right? He sees the game a little bit quicker in the passing game in that capacity, but he equally, missed a bunch of throws Saturday. I was sitting there going, okay, he's going to break the school record. There's a 5th touchdown pass to be had, and there were 4 or 5 just misses, not on touchdowns, but on plays, 3rd downs that would have kept it alive. So it was not a perfect game, even though, Rudy Howard got carried off on the shoulders. There was more there in the tank even for him, but he's a processor. He's in the pocket. Malik, Cade, Phillip, those guys are maximized when he's in there. But Deuce, the run game, the 1-2 punch, some O-line help with QB run, especially against a Texas front, could also be beneficial with Adrian. So once again, you kind of betwixt in between with what decision and what direction you want to go between those two.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line. I thought they were terrific in all facets of the game. Didn't allow a sack, 1 tackle for loss against an Oklahoma State defense that had came into the game 7th in the country, as you know, Brock, and tackles for loss per game. So they were tremendous. Between Adrian and Will Howard, you also have 2 of the better redemption stories in college football, right? I mean, how cool is that and unique from your perspective?
Yeah, it was the Oklahoma game in particular, because Will took a beating in town. Adrian took a beating nationally. Adrian was right there at the hip, Siamese twins with on the struggle bus with Scott Frost, right? It was all of his turnovers and all of his struggles and never elevating that program and all of that weight on his shoulders. And you could just feel him, right? Pulling it like these guys do weight sleds. So for him, it was just cutting that cord. And even the loss with Tulane, where your coach very publicly just says, hey, man, cut it loose, just play without fear. So there was a ton more, years and years and years and years of baggage of starts and starts and starts for Will. Yes, that locally, and I'm sure on social media in that market and in the student body, there were rough days. There were rough seasons of his life there, but he was never, I think, the redemption story on the national scale that Adrian was. But for his teammates, that I'm sure had his back, that knew he was thrown into the fire well before he was ready in every way, physically, mentally, emotionally, skill set wise, accuracy wise, which is still a work in progress. But you could see the love that those dudes had for him, right? And the joy that they had for him is one of theirs over the last 3 years in a pretty demanding program that asks a lot of those guys year round in their developmental process. And I think that too played into the Rudy Ruger moment on the field.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think of the job Colin Klein's done with this K-State offense? You mentioned you're friends with him as well, family connections. What do you make of his future in the coaching ranks?
Ooh, he is a solid human, man, right? He is just one that everybody that comes in contact is better for it. He was, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly some of the background I have on it was a driving force in Adrian's decision.
Yep.
Made the trip to Lincoln and spent time with him and broke bread with him. And I think Adrian went, yeah, that's kind of human that if I'm going to invest another year in college football and put my body in harm's way again and try to rally my career, he'd be a pretty neat guy to journey in that process with. He's grown from the Tulane game to today. I think I shared on the broadcast how I said, hey, you still getting handwritten letters from Coach Snyder, because that's obviously Venables has talked about it this year. And he's like, no, mostly texts, which is pretty hip of the Regal Bill Snyder. He's got some new school to him. So he's texting, but he did say, yeah, after that Tulane game, there was a handwritten note on some maybe third down possibilities, some things concept-wise with this personnel that you may want to consider, not telling you how to do your job, but just as an ally and friend and mentor and confidant and everything else. So I loved calling Colin's games. I remember I called was it a 5 overtime game with A&M? Four overtime game with A&M, and he's just – bloodied and beaten and just doesn't matter. Get right back under center, and wasn't the prettiest thrower, but holy cow, was he a winner. And you're starting to see that, and they needed that. I think the O-line coach and his makeup, pretty gruff and rough and tough guy, he needs a Colin Klein. That offensive group needs a Colin Klein. That offensive personnel needs a Colin Klein. And you're seeing them grow in comfort and gain in experience, which is the most valuable tool as a play caller.
Couple more questions, Brock, and then I'm going to let you get out of here. I really appreciate your time. I mean, shifting gears a bit, K-State's defense has now essentially held 4 of its 8 opponents without a touchdown this season. What and who has stood out to you on that side of the football for the Wildcats?
Yeah, Felix jumps off the page, and the fact that he's battling some injury this season makes it even more remarkable. he's one of those that you watch on film and he looks like he's 6'7", 290, like JJ Watt, just swallowing everybody. And then you see him on the paper and even in person, you're like, wow, you play so, and he's a big man, don't get me wrong, but he plays even bigger than any of what his numbers say. Eli Huggins makes it go. I mean, without him, they can't do what they do. Him taking on consistently and beating consistently the point with two guys just in a massive game of grizzly bear versus grizzly bear, and he just doesn't relent. So, and then the two corners are just playing at such a high level. So kind of at every level, the linebackers are super sound. They don't hesitate. I think we hit on that with Austin, and we'll see whether or not Daniel can come back. He was in a break glass in emergency Saturday. Maybe with another week, he will be available, but they're buying into it. They understand it. They're now a year and a half into it. Josh Hayes is another one that is just a critical chip at that field safety position to match up, to be able to play man-to-man coverage, because you see where I think a lot of these 3-down schemes struggle is just when they have to play zone, right? We just don't have the speed to match up. So you see many of them, Iowa State, the first to do it, to go, you know what? We don't have 4-4 corners. We don't have 4-4 nickel. We don't have guys that can run with Texas and Oklahoma. So we got to do this, put an extra guy, play a lot of zone, tighten the windows. The advantage K-State has, and you see it a little bit with TCU too, in that 3-down, to be able to come down and play man and have two lurkers or have an extra spy or have an extra safety free, because you love the way that Echo and Julius and Josh can all cover down. And that's been, I think, one of the secret sauces as well.
When you look at this Texas game, you touched on the defense of Texas, Brock, but what about the offense? I'll tell you, the running game, they've gashed K-State in the running game the last 3 years. Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson. You mentioned Daniel Green. I think that's going to be key if he can give it a go on Saturday at the linebacker position. But what do you view? What do you see in that Texas offense?
Yeah, I see a bunch of NIL Lamborghini deals, and that's about right. Like they're some Lamborghinis, right? And I think Sark does a masterful job, and part of the challenge, and I look forward to talking to him tomorrow, and Joe as well, your D coordinator. And how do they're the one group, and I think Sark, and it's why Nick Saban was as enamored with him years ago and wanted him and thought he was one of the best, and went on the record as saying he's one of the best schemers in the game. Because I don't know, are you a baseball guy at all?
I am. Yep. I'm a Royals fan.
You're a Royals fan. So, that pitching ninja site that they have where, they show the ball coming out of the delivery, and there's two things coming out of the hand, and the best of them, the Garrett Coles and Shohei's and a bunch of them, that ball will be, I don't know, 10 feet, 20 feet to the plate, and it's on the same line. And then all of a sudden fastball goes shoop, slider goes shoop, or sinker or whatever it may be. And that's what Sark does. He makes plays look the same, and he puts those defenses in a bind. And it's not just RPO, right? It's their motion game and their run game and their play action game with Quinn, who just has a beautiful ball that he throws. Oh my gosh. That thing comes out of his hands so clean and just the tightest spiral. But that's not the point here. The point, back to pitching ninja, is he makes it on those safeties and linebackers really hard, because these are the same two plays, the same two motions. And is it a run or is it play pass? Is it a run or is it going to counter back? Is it a run or is a reverse coming off of it? And he stacks those plays in such a way that he makes it, man, it's really hard. So, this is the advantage that they have, I think, with Josh, maybe more than a year ago, with the confidence their corners are playing with. Obviously, the one receiver is lightning in a bottle, and you do not want to leave him one-on-one. I don't think anybody in the country can cover him in a one-on-one situation, that being worthy, because his speed is that sick. But, the rest of it, they're going to have to play man and commit some extra people, as you said, to stop a run game that has just torn them apart the last couple of years.
Well, Brock, hey, I appreciate how gracious you were with your time. I'm thrilled that we could make this work. I mean everything I said about you and Jason on the broadcast. You probably saw on Twitter, K-State fans are thrilled you're on the call again this Saturday against Texas. You make it great, and so does Jason, obviously, and Allison's terrific on the sideline. We can tell how detail-oriented you guys are and how prepared you are. I love the football story that you caught onto and Allison reported on, and the roughed up balls. I mean, that's just incredible reporting. So Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I
You
hope
got
you
it.
have safe travels to Manhattan and have a great call on Saturday.
Well, let's hope the Wildcats on Saturday for you and your fan base play as well as you did today as a solo act. I mean, the fact that you did this all on your lonesome today without your normal team around you, man, you were terrific, and you too do a great job, as do so many of the people covering that team. And my daughter almost went to play basketball there, so Kansas State has a little special place. Took a couple visits there, an unofficial visit, and she was nearly a Wildcat basketball player. So love that basketball staff as well, the fans there, the environment there, and we'll look forward to doing our job Saturday, which should be a very compelling game Saturday night.
I thought I remembered that about your daughter. I was going
Yep.
to ask. So appreciate that. It should be an electric atmosphere, and look forward to having you on the call. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Brock.
You got it. Have a great
Thank
one,
you.
pal.
You too, Brock. Well, as we said, really appreciate the time Brock Huard gave us there. We've been trying to make that work out, and K-State fans are very fortunate to have had Brock on the call now for a third game this Big 12 season. So I know K-State fans are excited, looking at Twitter mentions and the replies of the tweet I had sent out when we found out Brock on Sunday night was going to be on the call this Saturday with Jason Benetti. So those guys are phenomenal, and thrilled we could bring Brock Huard to you guys on the 3 Mile Pod. I forgot I wanted to give a shout out, as always, to our lead sponsor, 360 Vodka, Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. This is the perfect weekend to be drinking some Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon, all right? We got a 6 o'clock kick, a night kick. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. Get your 360 Vodka. Get your Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Let's make this thing rowdy on Saturday night. I know you K-State fans will be able to handle your alcohol a lot better than TCU fans did when we were down in Fort Worth, so I trust that you guys will be good, but let's make this a raucous atmosphere. Get that Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Get that 360 Vodka. Bring it to your tailgate. Bring it to Manhattan, and enjoy it, as we should have a lot of fun on Saturday night against the Texas team and a huge matchup to get to the Big 12 championship, really. And guys know the significance of this matchup. If K-State wins this game, everybody in the Big 12 has 3 losses except for Baylor, and we'll see what happens with Baylor against Oklahoma on Saturday. If they lose that game, K-State could be at 1 loss with a 2-game lead with a 3-game stretch remaining. So huge game. Thanks to Brock Huard again. I know we didn't have our guys John and DY on this, but be on the lookout for another podcast, our standard preview pod that'll drop on Thursday in addition to this Brock Huard pod. For Cole Manbeck, well, for me, thank you for listening to another 3 Mile Pod.